This is the Definitely Uncertain podcast, brought to you by Gold Rock Capital. Each week, we look at how high net worth families can improve their lives, decisions, and investments in a deeply uncertain world. We always aim to provide practical information, even if we can't offer specific investment advice.
Welcome to another episode of the Gold Rock podcast, Definitely Uncertain. And today it's a really amazing privilege for us to have Yael Eckstein. Yael is the president and CEO of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, which many of you may have heard of, but we will get an opportunity to talk a little bit about that shortly. And really, we've invited Yael today to talk, first of all, about obviously the work of the fellowship, but really most interestingly, I think from our perspective, is to understand the family relationship. Yael has worked for many years inside of the fellowship and alongside her father, who obviously is incredibly well known throughout the Jewish world and also the Christian world, Rabbi Yael Eckstein. I'm going to maybe just have see if we can have a little chat about some of those things. So we'll maybe jump straight in. Welcome, Yael.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Happy to be here with you.
Okay. And so maybe just sort of to give us the background, can you share with us how the fellowship actually got started and what was the background to that? Just so that we sort of get an idea of what it is we're talking about here.
Sure. So it was in 1983 that my father, Rabbi Yael Eckstein, Zichrono Livracha, was a young rabbi who just got smicha from Rav Soloveitchik in New York, went and started his PhD program, almost finished it at Columbia University, and was sent by the ADL to Skokie, Illinois, him and my mom, in order to it was when the Nazi March was going to happen, which many people might remember, 1983, I believe. And he was sent in order to gather support against the Nazi March. And it's a community with lots of Holocaust survivors, lots of Jews relative to other cities. And when he got there, he realized that although the Jewish community was large relative to other cities, it was small in comparison to the larger population. And it was then that Christian leaders of Chicago started reaching out to my father to stand with the Jewish community against the Nazi March. And so that was the first introduction that my father had to Christian Zionists. And of course, as a young rabbi, the only thing he knew about Christians was what he read in the history books and what he learned. He didn't know the difference between Catholics and evangelicals and Protestants and all the different denominations. And so his first thought was like, okay, what do you want from us? Do you want to convert us? Do you want to kill us? What do you want? What do you want?
Where's the catch?
Exactly. Where's the catch? And that's when he started really exploring deeper the evangelical line of Christianity that really connects to their biblical roots, that studies the Torah, that studies the same, prophets that Jews study, and really understood that they're not trying to change us. They're not trying to kill us. They are trying to tap into what they always quote as Genesis 12:3, that their job as Gentiles is if they bless the Jewish people, they will be blessed by God.
And this sort of idea of what's the catch, to a certain degree, has remained with the story of relations between Jews and Christians since then, today, and going forward. And obviously, that whole arena of interfaith relations, whether it be through the type of work that you guys are doing, or sometimes on the more political side, where's the catch that does keep coming up? Do you find that over the years, people understand better what that developing relationship represents, or are you still answering the same questions that maybe your father had to do all those years ago?
Well, the first thing that I would say is that what I always tell the Jewish community is never let your guard down. You should always be critical of everyone. You should never let your guard down no matter what. But the second thing is that the Jewish community, I think after, 35 years since the fellowship. It was then that my father started the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, what we call for short IFCJ, or the fellowship. That it's been 35 years since the fellowship was established. The organization has raised and distributed over $1.6 billion to Jewish causes. And there's obviously not one example even of any Christians trying to convert Jews. And so I think that aspect of, the fear of Christians trying to convert Jews has really, people understand it. You have to always let your guard up, you keep your guard up, never let your guard down, but also to recognize that's not their intention in this relationship. The fellowship is the largest philanthropic organization in Israel and former Soviet Union that we focus on helping with basic needs. And yet there are so many other organizations that have been established since my father started the fellowship regarding Jewish-Christian relations. And so you have political lobby groups for Israel by the Christians. Over half the 4 million tourists to Israel every year are Christians. A lot of investors in Israel are Christians. And so what my father started as a bridge building organization with a focus on humanitarian aid 35 years ago has really blossomed into this relationship that's much larger than just the fellowship.
Okay, cool. So I see that you've been involved and have been working at the fellowship now for, I think, around 15 years. So maybe just tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Each time I hear that, I just feel old.
Well, there's a lot of good things about getting old.
Amen to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I always joke that my life is everything I've never dreamed of, that I never thought I would be living in Israel. I never thought I'd be working for my father's organization. When I was younger, I wanted to be a veterinarian. My father really wanted me to be a lawyer. My mom wanted me to do anything that made me happy. And my husband and I dated in New York when I was in college, got married, and we lived in Highland Park, New Jersey. And after a month of living in New Jersey, my husband looked at me and was just like, let's make Aliyah. If we ever want to live in Israel, it's easier now than any other time in our life. And so we got on a plane 2 weeks later, made Aliyah. I was in Israel and I had all my plans for what I was going to do in America. My husband was signed up for law school. We had all of our plans, and suddenly we find ourselves in Israel with no plans and not really speaking the language. Wow. And it was then that for really the first time I saw firsthand what the work of my father was. The first time I saw the fellowship's operations, feeding the hungry, bringing Jews on Aliyah, visiting Holocaust survivors, providing shoes for poor children. And I just looked at my father and I was like, Abba, I have to be part of this. Yeah. And he's like, no way. He looked at me, he's like, Yael, you're going to make a great lawyer. And we are like the cleanest organization. There's never been any controversy. I don't want anyone to say that there was nepotism. Right. So I'm not one that gives up easily, which is maybe why I would have made a good lawyer. But I went and I asked the head of the Israel office, like, do you have anything for me to do? Don't create a job for me, but I would love I'll do anything. And she let me put stamps on envelopes for minimum wage. and from there, I just really said, you know what, take the ball and run with it, prove yourself. Yeah. And so over the 15 years, I moved from position to position, which actually was a real gift because I got to see the inside details of every department of this huge operation.
Right. And truth of the matter is, obviously, it's often a big challenge. It doesn't matter if it's an organization for welfare or charity, or if it's a big family business. The challenge for parents who maybe have mixed emotions about whether to introduce their children into the business. On the one hand, many people are very proud to be able to do that, and on the other, as you say, they're very conscious of not making an easy track. Right. And I think the what we see often is the idea of coming in and doing it from the stamp room, as it were, from the mail room. I think it gives everybody a feeling that, okay, she's going to earn her spurs, and if she's good, she'll make it through. If not, she'll figure out and do something else. And obviously, many years later, you're still there, so it kind of worked out. At what stage did you started to feel that this was going to be the thing that you were going to carry on doing for a long period of time?
It's a great question. I I think it was the 2006 Lebanon war in Israel. So after I started putting stamps on envelopes, I did that for around a year and a half. And then I started calling donors, like major donors on behalf of my father.
Mm-hmm.
And it was right after I gave birth. And I was like, I am not leaving my child to go in for minimum wage, putting stamps on the envelopes, but I still want to do something. So that's when I reached out to the head of our Chicago office and said the same thing that I previously said to the head of the Israel office: don't create a job for me, but if there's something I could do to genuinely help, I want to. And that's when he said, we have so many major donors who love your father. Could you call on his behalf? And that was the first time I actually had experience with our donors, with Christian Zionists.
Yeah.
And it was like one of the most inspiring times of my life, just to hear, I was raised always, we don't have friends. Everyone hates the Jewish people. We're all alone. I moved to Israel where we have, enemies on every single border. Right. Yeah. And suddenly I'm talking to people who are like, we love you. We pray for you. We stand with you. We'll do anything that you need. Just hearing the most unbelievable stories of this love for the Jewish people, genuine love, and saying things that I never really, heard before, even being raised Orthodox, of like, you're the chosen people, so things even from my own faith that it made me have to really explore, like that concept of chosen people. What does that mean? And I ended up finding the way that I understand it is from Rav Shlomo Carlebach, who says, what does it mean that you're the chosen people, that we're the chosen people? It means we were chosen to tell the world that they're chosen. So kind of to spread this love of God and to really be the role models for the world of what it means.
It sounds like you got hooked, for sure.
I got hooked. I got hooked. Just, I realized the importance of it, that this was something bigger than even giving hungry people food and children boots. This is something of, we have friends for Israel, and it wasn't so well known back then. And I felt like by me talking to them, I was actually doing my small part in strengthening these friends for Israel, which felt very meaningful for me. And it was during the 2006 war when the fellowship started a project building bomb shelters. It was the first time that there were like lots of rockets inside of Israel.
Inside of Israel, yeah, I remember clearly.
Yeah. So I went up to visit just so that I was talking to our major donors so I could tell them about the project. And I remember it was like a 13-hour day. And so on the way back, I took out my computer and just wrote what I saw, because I was a creative English major in college, and creative writing is my passion. So, and through that, we raised our first $5 million for bomb shelters.
Wow.
And so I think that was when I realized, when my father realized, when the board realized, okay, she connects to our donors. The donors love her. Yep. She's able to do writing in a way that speaks to them. And we need to get her more involved. So I think that was really when it all clicked.
So during sort of from then till, a couple of years ago, during all that period, you started working very, very closely with your father, or is that something that also developed over time?
So that also developed over time. I loved calling donors, so I did that. I mean, I still am in very close contact with many of our donors, and I try both personal through videos and phone calls and things like that, but also on a mass scale through social media, kind of sharing that personal side and things like that. But it was many years until I really started working on operations side by side with my father. I would say that was maybe 4 years before he passed away, after I was ready with the organization for around 12 years, that I started getting into the weeds. That, my father kind of was nearing retirement and was kind of losing patience with administrative and didn't feel like dealing with it. And I was someone that understood all the different areas. And so it actually got to a point where my father only kind of wanted to talk to me and direct me on what to do, like look into this, take care of that, move this forward, advance this program. And it was then that the board really saw, through the success of our relationship and what we were able to accomplish together, that the board, even without my father present, voted me president-elect for when my father was going to retire. So that kind of changed the dynamic to that final relationship of really just onboarding me as far as taking over.
Tell us a little bit about some of the things, whether it's in management or, the way he saw the world or the work that he did. A couple of things that you carry with you every day in the work that you do now. You obviously had a very special and unique opportunity to work very closely with somebody who achieved so much. It's something that I can only identify with in a small way. Share with us a little bit about, a couple of things that have really left a huge impression on how you now run the organization.
Well, I think there are two sides. I think there are the sides of what I learned from him that I take with me every step of the way of how to run the organization, just of his dedication to the people. Although we got to a place where we're helping, over 1 million people a year, he cared about every individual. His ability to see strategically. It was never enough that we were helping X amount of people. He wanted to make sure that it was done in the most strategic and effective way according to criteria. He wanted to do everything in order to help the most people possible. So in a way, the glass was always half empty, but it motivated him to continue helping more people. He never lost that passion for what he did, nor compassion for the people that he helped. He was never judgmental a day in his life. I've never heard him say anything like, oh, why don't they go out and find a job? Sometimes when you're dealing with really poor people, it could be easy to be judgmental. He was never judgmental, only compassionate, only there to help. He had a heart for all the organizations of people who were running their own programs. He was so impressed by them, by others who were doing good things, that he wanted to invest in them and give them the funds in order to continue their work. He always looked at everything 10 steps ahead. It was never what you saw, but it was what you didn't see, that you had to ask the questions and explore and scratch the surface. He never took one penny for granted. Every single gift, he would always be looking into, are we sending thank you notes to the person who gave 97 cents in an envelope? It wasn't a focus.
It's worth mentioning that although you raise enormous sums of money, many of these donations are from they're very, very small amounts of money, each of the individual donations.
Yeah, the last year of his life, we raised $124 million, and our average gift was $67 a month. And so those are, those are the positive things that I take with me that lead me, and I hope I am able to implement within my thinking and operations every day. And then there's also the things that he didn't do that I learned from, that there were so many things I'd be like, but we have to do X, Y, and Z. And he would look at me and he would say, Yael, you're right, but not right now. And so it was after he died that I became president that I looked at those things that I told him we should be doing this and this, and he said, not right now, that I took it as kind of my sign of now is when we implement all the things that he wanted to implement and for whatever reason didn't.
So let's talk about big shoes and stepping in. As you say, the board effectively had driven the process of saying how we're going to, consider the continuation, the mover from founder-led to second generation. Sometimes it can be family, sometimes it can be external management. One of the big challenges when somebody has founded an organization that's turned so successful, enormous shoes to fill. Did you see people sort of looking and saying, "Oh, this is never going to work. Yael is never going to pull this off"? Maybe not from the people who really understood from inside the organization, but I can imagine there may have been naysayers just waiting for this to be a disaster. Did you sense any of that, or
so? Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it reminds me of at the at my father's shiva, the mayor of Netanya came and said, "Your father had such big shoes. How are you going to fill them?" And I was with a friend and someone that I work with, and she looked at the mayor and said, "She's not going to fill those shoes. She is going to wear her own." And I think that really sums up kind of like I always looked at my father, and still do obviously, as my hero, my inspiration, my teacher, I learned everything. I would study him day and night. And what I realized was I could never be him. And if I try, I'm going to fail. And so I have to tap into what I uniquely bring to the organization, what I uniquely bring to the operations in order to have my best chance of success. Because if I just try to copy him, it's not going to work.
Was that something that you managed to talk to him about, in the last few years before he passed away?
Oh, yeah. He would always say, he's like, Yael, you're going to bring this organization so much bigger than I ever brought it. You're so smart. I mean, I had so much, I have so much hakarat hatov always to this day until the day I die at Mea V'Esrim B'ezrat Hashem for the encouragement and appreciation and just belief that my father had in me, that he would always say, Yael, you do so much better than I do. Like there was one time where he called one of our major donors to thank them for $100,000 gift. And the answer, he said, hi, this is Rabbi Eckstein calling from Israel. And I think this was a big turning point for him. And they said, Rabbi Eckstein, Yael's dad. And he said, okay, my work here is done. Yeah.
Right. True nachas. True nachas. Let's switch gears for a moment. Obviously, everybody, whether it's in the business world and you're in human welfare and fundraising and so forth, 2020 has turned out to be one of the weirdest years and the strangest, most challenging years we've all been through. It almost doesn't matter how old you are. This is a complete curveball for everybody. How has that affected the work of the fellowship? I'm assuming that the people that you're beneficiaries, the people that you're helping, obviously they've had a difficult year. How is it also affecting fundraising? How organizationally are you sort of managing the process? You take any of those directions? Has it pogesh otach, as they say?
So normally I think when there are changes in any operation, whether it's business or nonprofit, you look for the control, and then you're able to compare where you are to that control. We had no control this year in the sense of it was the transition year between my father and myself. It was a year of COVID. It was a year where all of our fundraising material, so when I say transition between my father and myself, it's internally, management and putting together the office and the protocols and the goals and the KPIs and the mission and the focus. And then there's the external, that you could use a control of an infomercial we did, previously versus COVID year, or direct mail we did previously versus a COVID year. But everything changed because it's the first time that it's me and not my father. And so it's hard to say what this is attributed to. And I'm a spiritual person, so I attribute it to Kilo Chastei Hashem, the grace of God, as you say in English. I like it in Hebrew though. Chastei Hashem, I think sounds really good, and I connect to that. But I think that's what this year was. When my father passed away, we ended the year, like I said, at around $124 million. And this year, the fellowship is ending at over $150 million globally. So I think I attribute it to a lot of things. I attribute it to, first and foremost, obviously, I think I have a really amazing angel in heaven rooting for me and this organization. Second of all, our focus at the fellowship, and something that was very important for me to continue and even, focus on even more, is basic needs. We're not in education. We're not in events. We're not in politics. We are on basic needs. How to effectively...
The low end of Maslow.
Exactly. How to effectively distribute food to 30,000 Holocaust survivors in a matter of a week. And so many organizations have moved their focus from those basic needs to more progressive issues. Yeah. And so I think that now the fellowship has all the tools to effectively distribute this aid that's so needed in Israel. And so we've become the organization, both for Jews and Christians, that they turn to in order to effectively distribute these basic need items to the elderly and the orphans, specifically in Israel and the former Soviet Union. And so I think that's one thing. And the second thing is that we rely on $60 donations. And so the financial situation around the world has a big effect when someone makes a $2 million pledge. When they're trying to give $60 ma'asrot tithes from their Social Security, it doesn't make a difference. And then the last thing I would say is that the government of Israel this year, on top of everything, because we're the most effective body in in distributing basic needs to Israel and within Israel to the population that needs it according to very strict criteria, etc. The government of Israel allocated 70 million shekel for the fellowship to distribute during Corona times for basic needs.
Brilliant.
So there's a lot of amazing, interesting progress to carry on my father's legacy.
Let's hope we won't need quite so much of it next year. Maybe, hopefully it'll be better. We're getting sort of towards the end, and often I ask our guests, a lot of the people that are watching this themselves are involved in family businesses or family organizations. You're a second generation person in that sense, taking over from your father. Are there any things that maybe you could offer as advice or things to think about when, people who are in their maybe 20s or 30s and have their own, questions for themselves as to, should I be involved? Should I not be involved? What are the things that, I should be thinking about making those types of decisions?
I think that working in family business, nonprofit, working with a parent could be, like so many things, either the best thing in the world or the worst thing. It could strengthen your relationship, strengthen your respect for one another, appreciation for one another, or it could break it apart. I feel so lucky that with my father, when he passed away, I remember thinking like how most people are. When a parent dies, it's kind of closure. That's all you're getting from the parent. And most children feel like they didn't get something from the parent. Mm-hmm. The parent didn't see me in one way. They didn't. And I feel so hugely blessed beyond belief that I feel like my father saw me in the professional world, saw me as a mother, saw me as a child. At work, this is, I think, the best advice from my experience that I could give is at work, you are not family. You are in the hierarchy of the company. When I was in the office, my father would say something. It wasn't ever, not once, ba-da-ba. No. If I have clear data and facts that I want to present, I present it in a clear way, just like every other employee. And at the end of the day, I look at my father as the president, the CEO, mm-hmm. the boss, the final word, and I accept that and carry it out just like any other staff. That I think that's the biggest. That's the biggest thing that I learned, that when I'm in the office, I act like everyone else. My father is the boss, just like everyone else. And I think the benefits to that is that you're able to learn. Sometimes it could feel like to the younger generation that the older generation doesn't really get it. There's so much happening in technology and so many different areas that, the world has changed and it's changed so quickly that it's easy to come in and feel like they don't get it. But the truth is they have so much to offer. And if you act professionally and strategically, and you could present, like I said, data and facts and very clear arguments, it's the most amazing bridge of the younger generation giving the tools that they have from the new technology and new world while still benefiting from the knowledge and experience of the older generation.
That is a terrific insight. I think we all could definitely remember occasionally that experience is given to those who've actually had the experiences, and therefore we have always got a tremendous amount that we can take and learn from that. It demands a small amount of humility in order to be able to receive that experience and advice, which you obviously had, and maybe that was one of the sources of your success within the organization, not coming in as I'm Yael, the daughter, but I'm just another employee licking stamps and, worked your way through. I got to say, this has been a wonderful opportunity for me to learn a little bit more about fellowship and yourself and also your father and his great work. And thanks so much for being part of the podcast today.
Thank you, Daniel. It was very fun.
Okay, so we now at the end of the next version of Definitely Uncertain, the Gold Rock podcast, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.